Let's break down what we're seeing in these screenshots of the Whoop Strap MG ecosystem and app, because it's clearly trying to go way beyond the typical fitness tracker territory, and whether it actually succeeds is a whole other story. Starting with the marketing leaflet, Whoop is offering 3 tiers: 1, Peak, and Life. The pitch escalates quickly. 1 gives you the basics: sleep, strain, recovery, VO2 max, and hormone insights. Peak tosses in health span and real-time stress monitor, which should really be standard if you're advertising professional grade anything. Then, Life brings in the heavy artillery: blood pressure insights, ECG heart monitoring, and arrhythmia detection. That's where it tries to cross into medical-grade wearables, and it's no longer just about athletic optimization, but full-blown preventative healthcare territory. The question is, does it hold up to that claim? Looking at the app screenshots, there's no doubt Whoop has created a visually slick dashboard. It gives immediate feedback on sleep 80%, recovery 88%, and strain 13.7. But here's the catch: the numbers look scientific, but what do they actually mean in a clinical sense? Strain at 18.7 on what scale? Recovery at 88% based on what physiological thresholds? There's a black box quality to this that relies heavily on user trust without transparency in metrics formulation. Then comes the Whoop Age feature, which is clearly designed to gamify longevity, 26.3 years old, with a note that you're 10.4 years younger biologically. Sounds flattering, sure, but the way it's presented is borderline pseudoscientific. The pace of aging slider marked at 1.1x is interesting but ambiguous. What exactly contributes to that decimal bump? They say it's HR zones, which is fair, but it's still oversimplifying a deeply complex process. Longevity isn't just cardiovascular. Zooming into the fitness insights, the VO2 max is 60 milliliter per kilogram min, which Whoop equates to being 5.2 years younger, solid data point, but the translation to age reduction is speculative at best. RHR at 48 BPM earns you a 1.4-year youth credit. Again, too much emphasis on biomarker age conversion, which can easily mislead users into thinking they're shaving off literal years with small metric changes. On the health dashboard, everything is within range, including respiration, SpO2, HRV, and temperature, which is good but also vague. These aren't diagnostics, they're trend indicators. The blood pressure insights are in beta and based on 1 reading per day from wearable data, not from a real cuff. So take that with a grain of salt. The ECG and arrhythmia detection, if accurate, they're a powerful addition, but we're not told what medical grade standards or validations have been met here, and Whoop hasn't published peer-reviewed data on that functionality. The stress monitor claims 1 hour 15 minutes of high stress today, but what qualifies as high stress? There's no clinical range, and it's using HRV-based proxies. In other words, it's still a bit of guesswork masked in data viz elegance. So here's the real verdict. Whoop is pushing hard into the quantified self and longevity arena, throwing around terms like health span and biological age that sound scientific, but need more rigorous backing. It's definitely appealing for athletes and data nerds who want to feel in control, but the platform still lacks transparency in how it calculates these metrics. There's potential, but it's dangerously close to overpromising with underexplained methodologies. It's sleek, persuasive, and probably useful. Just don't confuse it with a medical device or a crystal ball for your lifespan. This blood pressure feature rollout in Whoop Life is polished in presentation, but steeped in caveats, hedged with disclaimers, and frankly riding the line between innovation and overreach. Let's pick this apart. The intro screen paints the whole thing as a revolutionary frontier in health science, giving early access to a blood pressure feature still in development. That language, still in development, is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Whoop's basically saying, here's a shiny tool that might be useful, but don't take it too seriously. They push this like it's a community-driven R&D effort, But from a user's perspective, it's a test lab masquerading as a health insight. The blood pressure reading screen shows a reading of 118/78, positioned nicely in a green-orange semicircle, looks intuitive at a glance, but is clinically soft. The given range, systolic 108 to 128, diastolic 73 to 83, is tighter than standard guidelines, possibly to make it feel more personalised, but there's no source or justification for how those brackets were chosen. It presents the data with confidence, but hides the methodological scaffolding behind that single model-based estimate line buried a few slides later. The explainer slides add some context. Sure, blood pressure affects more than just cardiovascular risk. It's also linked to sleep, HRV, and overall stress resilience. That's valid. But then it pivots to explaining how it works. Whoop's sensor generates a model-based estimate from wearable data. Translation? There's no actual blood pressure measurement happening here. No cuff, no fluid dynamics, no calibration. It's not measurement, it's inference, likely from a mix of HRV, pulse transit time, and machine learning trained on population datasets. And the language model-based estimate gives away the lack of individual precision. Then it gets even more slippery. Whoop asks the user if they're on blood pressure medication, have been pregnant, or have elevated pressure, likely to help train its estimate engine or screen for edge cases. But instead of tailoring accuracy, this looks more like a manual fudge factor, essentially labeling users into risk bins. And just when you think it might commit to being something useful, the final disclaimer throws the brakes. Whoop spells it out clearly. It's not a replacement for a blood pressure cuff, not a diagnostic, not for treatment guidance, and not suitable for people on medication or pregnant. This isn't FDA-cleared tech. It's a personal well-being tool, which sounds like something out of a wellness startup pitch deck. And at the end of the day, that's all it is, a rough indicator trying to sound clinical without the burden of liability. So the critical takeaway? Whoop's blood pressure insights are flashy, framed like innovation, but they're heavily hedged and speculative. The promise is bold, but the execution is far from medically rigorous. Until they publish validations, studies, or earn regulatory clearance, this remains a gamified suggestion engine, not a trustworthy biometric tool. If you're serious about your blood pressure, you're still better off with a validated cuff and a real clinician. All right, let's stir the pot a little because Whoop's blood pressure insight feature is basically a vibe check with a heart rate sensor. So here we go. If your blood pressure is just a model-based guess, is your Whoop band basically that one overconfident friend who thinks they can read your mind just because you skipped your morning coffee? When Whoop says your systolic is 118 without a cuff, should we start calling this Schrodinger's blood pressure? Like, it exists in a quantum state until a real doctor opens the box? Would you trust a wellness tracker that gives you medical-sounding numbers, but then politely reminds you not to actually believe them? And here's the kicker. If Whoop says you're 10 years biologically younger, but also slightly hypertensive, is it just negging you into working out harder? This whole thing feels like it's trying to date you with compliments, then gaslight you with disclaimers. So tell me, do you think Whoop's playing doctor, or just role-playing one for your data dopamine hit? Now we're getting into the real meat of Whoop's latest flex, calibrated cuffless blood pressure and a full-blown ECG on your wrist feature. And this is where things get wild, intriguing, and just a little bit sketchy if you scratch beneath the surface. So first up, Whoop finally admits that to unlock its blood pressure estimates, you need a real cuff, not just any cuff, ideally a medically validated one which you then use to manually punch in your own readings. Yes, you have to do the work. It's like being asked to bake the cake just so Whoop can claim it knows what cake tastes like. You're inputting 3 data points, and from there, the band creates a model baseline to predict your pressure daily without needing the cuff again. That's cool in theory, until you realize it's like feeding a calculator 3 numbers and trusting it to guess the rest of your life's math problems. And you've got to love the calibration checklist. It's a full ritual. No coffee, no food, no stress, no bladder, no excuses. Sit like a Zen monk, then hope your pressure doesn't spike just trying to meet all the conditions. Honestly, the prep makes the device feel more like an anxious overachiever than a reliable clinical tool. But once you're in, Whoop starts dressing up these cuff-free predictions in a very official-looking UI, bold numbers, tidy dials, a weekly graph. It looks confident. But remember, underneath that slick dashboard is a guess powered by a very limited sample size and probably a ton of assumptions about your physiology that may or may not be true. Now let's talk about the heart screener. This one sounds serious. ECG and AFib notifications. Whoop is leaning hard into Apple Watch territory, but they're walking on thinner regulatory ice. You have to confirm you're not wearing a pacemaker, are over 22, and haven't been diagnosed with other arrhythmias. So they're being cautious, but that also signals this is a tightly scoped feature, not general-purpose cardiology, more like a digital stethoscope you can't quite trust to detect murmurs. The app tries to make the whole thing feel clinical. It explains ECGs, shows diagrams of how the signal flows through your arm, and lets you generate PDF reports for your doctor. But here's the catch. None of this is FDA cleared as a diagnostic device, at least not yet. And the onboarding repeatedly reminds you this is for personal insight, not medical advice. So here's the million-dollar question. Would you trust a band that asks you to do the doctoring just so it can pretend to know your pressure and your rhythm? Or let's have some fun with this. If you're the one entering the calibration numbers, is Whoop really the health tracker or just your glorified digital diary with attitude? If your Whoop ECG gives you a clean bill of health but your real cardiologist sees something different, who's more trustworthy, the guy with a medical degree or the wristband with a PDF generator? And what's next? Are we going to let Whoop guess our cholesterol based on how guilty we look in the mirror? It's impressive. It's bold. It's also teetering on the edge of credibility. Whoop wants to be the oracle of your body, but right now it's still just borrowing your tools and hoping you won't notice the guesswork dressed up as insight. This Whoop ECG setup might look like it belongs in a cardiologist's toolkit, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's more pretend doctor than actual diagnostic. The animation looks slick, the waveform is satisfyingly medical, and the wording carefully engineered to sound serious while sidestepping responsibility. So here's what we're told. The ECG can detect normal sinus rhythm, AFib, high and low heart rate, and has an inconclusive bin, which basically means, yeah, something's weird, but our app isn't smart enough to name it. That's already a red flag. You're giving users the illusion of certainty while still admitting the tech has blind spots. It gets even more theatrical when it comes to instructions. You've got to pick which wrist the strap is on, as if the Whoop band can't figure that out itself. And then you press your fingers on the sensor like you're cracking a safe. The countdown clock makes it feel clinical. The pulsing waveform makes it feel like a live broadcast from your heart. And then, plot twist, you're reminded again, this is not a medical diagnosis. It's basically saying, thanks for the data, now go call your doctor if this freaks you out. Now tell me, if your wearable is trying this hard to look like a medical device but keeps repeating it's not, is that safety or just plausible deniability? Let's push it further. Why does Whoop get to wrap you in a faux clinical UX, show you real ECG-looking waveforms, and then throw up a not-for-diagnosis sign like it's a carnival fortune teller? Shouldn't there be a higher bar for devices that claim to monitor arrhythmias? If your wristband tells you that you might have AFib but can't be sure, Is that a health tool or just a daily anxiety generator? And this, if your Whoop ECG gives you an inconclusive reading but still lets you export a PDF for your doctor, who's really doing the work here, the algorithm or the marketing team? Whoop's ECG feature is the wearable equivalent of a magic 8-ball dressed in scrubs. It gives you a peek into your heart, but you still need a human to make sense of what it's really saying. For now, it's playing with the aesthetics of healthcare, not the standards. Now, this is where Whoop tries to cross the line from fitness toy into clinical cosplay. We're staring at a full ECG report with waveform traces, symptom logging, timestamps, and a polished PDF export that looks like it came from a hospital printer. Except, crucially, it didn't. First, let's talk about that symptom screen. Whoop asks if you had fatigue, chest pain, dizziness, irregular heartbeat, shortness of breath, and more. Fair enough, but here's the fun bit. What's the point of asking if all it does is tack those symptoms onto a report it openly says isn't a diagnostic tool? It's basically asking you, hey, did you feel like you were dying while we captured your vibe, and then quietly whispering, cool, but don't trust this output. Then we get the final ECG result, normal sinus rhythm, no AFib, no tachycardia, no bradycardia. Clean sweep. Sounds reassuring, right? Except right underneath, it reminds you that this doesn't guarantee that you're healthy or don't have a heart condition. That's like your therapist saying, you seem fine, but also you might be a sociopath. The PDF report? That's the showstopper. It includes waveforms with labelled axes, BPM, Whoop branding, and enough white space to scream official. But let's not be fooled. It's styled to look like something a cardiologist would file, while clearly disclaiming that it's not meant for diagnosis or treatment. That duality is strategic. It's trying to insert itself into your medical workflow without ever being accountable for what it says. So let's get spicy. If Whoop gives you a clean ECG and you still feel off, do you trust your gut, your gadget, or your gadget's legal disclaimer? If your wristband can generate a PDF that looks more legitimate than half the stuff in your doctor's inbox, but still tells you we're just spitballing, who's responsible when someone takes it too seriously? And let's be real, if your tracker needs to tell you it's not a diagnostic tool every 30 seconds, is that to protect you or just to protect their lawyers? Whoop wants to be the high-performance coach, the sleep whisperer, and now your amateur cardiologist. But what it's really nailed is how to blur the line between actionable insight and aesthetic performance. It knows how to look like medicine, feel like medicine, and still walk away when the results go sideways. That's not health tech. It's health theatre. All right, let's stir the pot a little harder, with the kind of questions that make you smirk and squint at your wrist at the same time. If your Whoop tells you you're in normal sinus rhythm, but you just logged chest pain, shortness of breath, and felt like a defibrillator commercial, who are you going to believe, your body or your bracelet? If a PDF report from a non-diagnostic device looks more polished than what your cardiologist gives you, is it helpful transparency or just high-end gaslighting with a heartbeat graph? Why does Whoop ask you about symptoms like dizziness and palpitations, then immediately tell you, but don't worry, this isn't a diagnosis? Is this smart tracking or a wearable-induced existential crisis? If your ECG result says everything's fine, but you still feel like you got hit by a sleep-deprived bus, is Whoop being reassuring or just emotionally unavailable? And this one's for the skeptics. If Whoop can track strain, stress, sleep, pressure, and pulse, but still can't say if you're actually okay, should we be calling it a health tracker or just a very clingy Fitbit with a PhD fantasy? Whoop's playing doctor in the mirror, but it's up to you to decide whether it's a genius biohacker sidekick or a glorified placebo in a sleek band. Now, this is the part where Whoop's sleep staging performance gets dragged into the ring against a real EEG system, and the results are politely chaotic. These side-by-side plots and that confusion matrix throw a wet blanket over Whoop's dreamy marketing. Start with the basics. The top row in each plot is Zemax Dreamento EEG, a lab-grade polysomnography tool, while the bottom is Whoop Strap MG, trying its best to keep up with a sensor strapped to your wrist. At first glance, they're in the same time zone, but not speaking the same sleep language. And that's the real story here. Let's talk about those shaded mismatches. REM detection? Whoop's struggling. It's overconfident in calling REM when EEG doesn't back it up, especially around 3 a.m. and again after 6. That's not a small issue. REM is clinically meaningful. Too much, too little, or mistimed REM can flag everything from neurological issues to poor recovery. Whoop's red bars are throwing darts, sometimes hitting the REM bullseye but often sticking into a different stage altogether. Then there's the wake detection mess. EEG sees micro-awakenings and brief wake periods scattered through the night. Pretty normal, but Whoop bulldozes right over them, smoothing everything into longer blocks of light or REM sleep. That's why the confusion matrix is brutal. Whoop only gets 31.4% of actual wake stages correct, while mislabeling huge chunks as light or even REM. Translation? Whoop's got a real bedtime blind spot. And then there's deep sleep. This is where things look decent. Whoop gets it right almost 90% of the time. But that's the easy part. Deep sleep has slower waves, lower variability, and clearer signals. Light and REM, not so much. Those are subtle, noisy, and often misread by wrist-based sensors relying on heart rate and motion alone. So now the sticky questions. If Whoop turns your 20 wake-ups into a seamless dream, is it improving your sleep or just your ego? When your Whoop claims you got tons of REM but EEG says nah, is that a recovery boost or just a placebo nap? If a tracker can't tell when you're awake, does it really know when you're asleep, or is it just guessing when you stop moving? And let's go big. Is sleep tracking from your wrist just wearable astrology with heart rate data? Whoop wants to be your sleep coach, but right now it's still failing the exam on REM and wakefulness until it stops hallucinating dreams you never had. Maybe don't build your entire recovery strategy on its bedtime stories. This confusion matrix lays bare Whoop Strap MG's actual sleep stage detection accuracy compared against EEG gold standard data from Zemax Dreamento. Each row is what Whoop predicted, and each column is the actual EEG-labeled sleep stage. The yellow diagonal highlights are where Whoop got it right. Everywhere else is a mistake. Let's rip through it. Deep sleep. Whoop nailed deep sleep classification with 89.9% accuracy. That's solid. It mostly knows when you're down in the neurological basement. But the 7.3% misclassification into light sleep shows a bit of sensor confusion. Deep and light can bleed into each other when you're not using EEG. Light sleep. Whoop predicted light sleep right 55.5% of the time. But here's the problem. 18.5% of what it thought was light sleep was actually REM, and 37.2% of actual light sleep got misread as wake. That's messy. It tells you Whoop's light sleep classification is noisy and overreaching in both directions. REM sleep, this is where it gets shaky. Whoop got 78.6% of REM sleep correct, but 23% of what it tagged as REM was actually light sleep. That's a big confusion. REM and light may look similar in heart rate variability, but the cognitive and recovery differences are huge. Whoop's estimates are not to be blindly trusted when it says you got tons of REM. Wake. Here's the eye-opener. Whoop only gets 31.4% of wake periods right. That means almost 70% of the time you're awake, and EEG knows it. Whoop either thinks you're asleep or just can't tell the difference. That explains why Whoop often reports unrealistically long continuous sleep, because it thinks your fidgeting, turning, or momentary arousals are just light sleep. So the takeaway? Whoop is pretty good at spotting the obvious, the slow-wave deep sleep, and does decently with REM. But when it comes to light sleep, and especially wake, it's fumbling in the dark. That makes its overall sleep architecture less reliable, and anyone using this data to tweak recovery or cognitive performance should proceed with a heavy dose of skepticism. Now ask yourself, would you take advice from a coach who thinks you're asleep when you're staring at the ceiling for 40 minutes? This confusion matrix is row normalized, meaning the percentages in each row add up to 100%, and that's exactly how it's supposed to work. Each row represents one of Whoop's predicted sleep stages: deep, light, REM, or wake, and the values across that row show how those predictions align with the actual sleep stages determined by EEG from the Zemax-Drumento system. So when Whoop says you were in deep sleep, 89.9% of that time actually matched deep sleep on EEG, while 7.3% of those moments were really light sleep, 1.8% were REM, and 0.9% were wake. The total for that row adds up to 99.9% due to rounding, not because of any mistake. Now here's the kicker. Columns do not add up to 100%, and they aren't meant to. This matrix isn't set up to show what EEG said and how Whoop mapped to that. Instead, it shows how trustworthy Whoop's guesses were. You can think of it as answering the question, when Whoop guessed X, how often was that correct? Rather than, given the truth was X, how often did Whoop find it? That's why interpreting the columns as needing to total 100% would be completely wrong. They're mixing up the framing. What this table tells us is sharp and critical. Whoop is incredibly good at identifying deep sleep. Nearly 90% of its deep predictions are spot on. That's because deep sleep is easy to catch with movement and heart rate data. It's slow, steady, and low variability. But it falls apart as things get fuzzier. Light sleep is a jungle. It only gets it right 55.5% of the time, and nearly a quarter of those light predictions are actually REM. That matters because REM and light might look similar to Whoop sensors, though, but they serve very different functions in cognitive and emotional recovery. Whoop also shows decent accuracy with REM, getting it right about 78.6% of the time, although again, it's mistakenly labeling a significant chunk of light sleep as REM. The real failure point is wake detection. Whoop guesses wake correctly just 31.4% of the time, meaning that nearly 70% of the time it thinks you're awake, you're not. That alone should send up red flags if you're relying on Whoop for insight into sleep continuity or disturbances. So if you're seeing good sleep scores on Whoop, don't get too cozy. There's a meaningful chance that what it calls REM might actually be light, and those supposed uninterrupted nights might be glossing over micro-awakenings entirely. Whoop's not a lie detector, but it sure isn't a sleep lab either. If Whoop is only detecting wakefulness accurately around 31% of the time, it doesn't outright invalidate all the other results, but it absolutely puts a dent in their reliability, especially when it comes to interpreting the continuity and fragmentation of sleep. The ability to detect when you're awake is foundational to accurately measuring sleep onset, sleep efficiency, and the number and duration of arousals throughout the night. If Whoop is systematically missing wake periods, especially brief awakenings that EEG captures but Whoop glosses over, then everything that depends on knowing when you're actually asleep becomes a bit suspect. For example, if you lie in bed tossing and turning for 40 minutes and Whoop thinks you're in light sleep the whole time, it's going to overestimate your total sleep time and paint a rosier picture of your recovery than reality warrants. That overconfidence can mislead you into thinking your habits are dialed in when they're not. This weak wake detection also introduces a ripple effect. If Whoop can't distinguish wake from light sleep well, then it's highly likely that some of what it calls REM or light sleep is actually quiet wakefulness. That further muddies the stage classification numbers, which already show confusion between REM and light in the matrix. It's like grading an exam where half the answer sheet is smudged. You can still make out some patterns, but you wouldn't want to base medical decisions or training regimens solely on it. So, no, it doesn't completely invalidate the deep or REM estimates. Those stages are easier to detect due to distinct heart rate variability patterns, but it does mean you should treat sleep continuity metrics like number of awakenings, time in bed versus time asleep, and sleep efficiency with heavy skepticism. Whoop can tell a general story about your sleep, but it can't guarantee that the narrative is accurate down to the minute-by-minute detail. And that's a serious limitation for anyone chasing precision in health, performance, or recovery. If Whoop is only detecting wakefulness correctly about 30% of the time, that doesn't mean the deep, light and REM numbers are off by exactly 30%, but it does suggest that a meaningful portion of those classifications may be contaminated by undetected wakefulness. Here's why that matters. In a sleep scoring system, every epoch or 30-second segment of time is labelled as either wake, light, deep or REM. If Whoop fails to recognize you're awake in a significant chunk of those epochs, then by default, it's misclassifying them as one of the sleep stages. So in practical terms, yes, some percentage of the reported deep, light or REM sleep is likely misattributed, not because those stages are being confused with one another, but because Whoop mistakenly thinks you're asleep when you're not. Now, does that mean 30% of all deep, light and REM numbers are false? Not quite. It's more nuanced. The 31.4% detection rate for wake doesn't tell us how often Whoop encounters wake periods overall. It tells us how well it recognizes them when they occur. So if you're a typical healthy sleeper with, say, 5% of your night spent awake, that 5% is the upper limit of what could be misallocated. But if you're someone with insomnia, frequent arousals or fragmented sleep, the consequences are bigger. In that case, the misclassified wake periods could make up 15% or more of the night, and now you're talking about potentially double-digit distortions across the sleep stages. Where this really matters is in the calculation of sleep efficiency and recovery metrics. If Whoop thinks you're getting 7.5 hours of continuous sleep, but you were actually awake for 45 minutes in chunks, it never caught, that recovery score it's giving you is based on a fantasy. And since the boundaries between light sleep and quiet wakefulness are already fuzzy without EEG, this misclassification mostly bleeds into light sleep, making those light sleep estimates particularly vulnerable. Deep sleep is more robust because of its distinct physiological signature, and REM tends to have clearer heart rate variability patterns as well, but even those can get padded with misread wake if the system is leaning too heavily on motion and HR alone. So while you can't say with mathematical certainty that the stage data is wrong by 30%, what you can say is that the foundation is compromised. Whoop is building its nightly sleep architecture on a floor that can't reliably tell if the lights are on. The plots show a head-to-head comparison between the Polar H10 chest strap and the Whoop MG strap during different types of workouts, spinning, running, and weightlifting, and then a few scatter plots to visually and statistically break down their agreement. Let's start with the time series plots. During spinning on both May 9th and May 10th, the two devices track closely with nearly identical waveforms throughout the intervals. That shows tight agreement in capturing rapid heart rate changes during high-intensity interval-style training. However, on May 11th, during the running session, there's a pretty clear overestimation of heart rate by the Whoop in the early part of the workout. It catches up later, but the lag in initial alignment is obvious. With weightlifting on the same day, you get a totally different story. The Whoop flattens out the peaks, underestimates the spikes, and smooths the recovery curves compared to the Polar. This kind of under-tracking is classic for wrist-worn sensors during resistance training because of wrist movement and muscle strain that confuses optical sensors. Now, shift to the scatter plots. These show correlation values, which are pretty strong across the board, R equals 0.93, 0.86 and 0.76 respectively, but correlation isn't everything. The first plot, probably spinning, has a beautifully tight cloud along the identity line, but even there, you can already spot a little overestimation of lower heart rates and underestimation at the very high end. The second plot, likely running, has much more clustering in the upper right zone, which reflects that Whoop sometimes drifts above the Polar when rates are high. The last one, almost certainly weightlifting, shows real spread and asymmetry. That lower R of 0.76 comes with bias. The Whoop underestimates across much of the range and the scatter is wide. It means less consistency, especially in moderate ranges where training decisions are often made. So what does it all mean? In steady-state aerobic work like spinning, Whoop holds its own and is impressively accurate. But in workouts where motion artifacts dominate, like running starts or resistance training, it's more erratic. And when a device can't track sharp peaks or recovery precisely, it limits your confidence in interpreting strain, max HR, and real-time load. Sure, correlation is good, but agreement at the extremes and during transitions is where real-world usefulness gets tested. And that's where the Whoop still stumbles. Consumer grade, clinical grade, and research grade devices sit on very different rungs of the reliability ladder, and the examples we've been discussing fit nicely into each category. Starting with consumer grade, these devices are built for accessibility, ease of use, and daily lifestyle integration. They prioritize convenience over precision. The WhoopStrap MG clearly falls into this category. It's sleek, user-friendly, packed with features like heart rate tracking, sleep staging, and ECG. But it's not a medical device. It's not FDA cleared, and it even explicitly warns users not to use its readings for diagnostic purposes. What it does well is track trends over time, provide wellness insights, and motivate behavior change. But if you needed to detect an arrhythmia reliably, or validate sleep stage timing for scientific purposes, you'd quickly hit its limitations. Clinical-grade devices, on the other hand, must meet strict regulatory standards and are designed for use in medical contexts. They go through validation processes, are often FDA cleared or CE marked, and are used by healthcare professionals for diagnosis and treatment decisions. The Omron blood pressure monitor is a good example here. It's trusted for clinical use, has been validated for accuracy, and operates on principles grounded in medical best practices. It's not flashy, but it does one thing very well and reliably: measure your blood pressure with a cuff-based oscillometric method that's proven. Then there's research-grade equipment, which is a whole different beast. These tools are built to capture raw high-resolution data, often in highly controlled environments, and they're used in academic or scientific research to validate hypotheses, develop algorithms, or benchmark new technologies. The ZMax Dreamento, with its EEG capabilities, represents this tier. It's not meant to look cool on your wrist, and it's not built for mass-market adoption. It's built to record brainwave data with high fidelity, giving detailed and accurate sleep staging that's considered the gold standard in sleep science. Its readings become the baseline against which consumer devices like Whoop are judged. The Polar H10 is an interesting hybrid. It's technically consumer available, but its accuracy, especially for heart rate via ECG electrodes, elevates it toward the research-grade realm. That's why it's often used as a benchmark in validation studies, sitting right in the sweet spot between clinical reliability and consumer accessibility. So when you compare a WhoopStrap MG to a Polar H10 during intense exercise, and you see a close but not perfect match, you're witnessing the trade-off between usability and precision in real time. In short, consumer grade is about experience, clinical grade is about safety and diagnosis, and research grade is about granularity and scientific rigor. Each has its place, but confusing one for the other leads to misinterpretation, overconfidence in metrics, or worse, poor health decisions based on data that was never intended for that purpose. Certainly, let's delve into the distinctions between consumer grade, clinical grade, and research grade devices using the examples we've discussed. Consumer grade devices are designed for everyday users seeking convenience and general wellness insights. The WhoopStrap MG exemplifies this category. It's a sleek, wrist-worn device that monitors metrics like heart rate, sleep stages, and activity levels. While it offers valuable trends over time, it's not FDA cleared and advises against using its data for medical diagnoses. Its primary goal is to motivate behavior change and provide general health insights. Clinical grade devices meet stringent regulatory standards and are used in medical settings for diagnosis and treatment. The Omron HEM 1720 blood pressure monitor is a prime example. It's validated for clinical accuracy, providing reliable systolic and diastolic readings. Healthcare professionals trust such devices for patient care decisions. Research-grade devices are utilized in scientific studies and prioritize data precision and depth. The ZMax Dreamento EEG system fits this category. It's designed for detailed sleep studies, capturing high-fidelity brainwave data to analyze sleep stages accurately. Researchers rely on such equipment for in-depth physiological analyses. The Polar H10 heart rate monitor occupies a unique position. While available to consumers, its accuracy rivals that of research-grade equipment. Athletes and researchers alike use it for precise heart rate monitoring during various activities. In summary, the ZMax EEG system developed by Hypnodyne Corp is a research-grade, wearable sleep monitoring device designed to bridge the gap between clinical polysomnography, PSG, and at-home usability. It offers high-fidelity EEG recordings through a comfortable headband, making it suitable for both laboratory and field studies. The system employs biocompatible hydrogel electrodes positioned at F7 FPZ and FFPZ, adhering to the International 10-20 system, and samples data at 256 Hz with 16-bit resolution, ensuring detailed capture of neural activity during sleep. What sets ZMax apart is its integration with Dreamento, an open-source Python-based toolbox tailored for sleep research. Dreamento facilitates real-time EEG monitoring, automatic sleep stage scoring, and sensory stimulation protocols, such as auditory or tactile cues, to explore phenomena like lucid dreaming or targeted memory reactivation. It also supports offline post-processing, allowing researchers to analyze data collected via ZMax independently. The system's design emphasizes ease of use without compromising data quality. Users can initiate recordings with a single button, and the device stores data on an internal memory card, eliminating the need for constant computer connectivity. This simplicity enables participants to conduct multi-night recordings in their natural sleep environments, enhancing ecological validity. Moreover, ZMax's compatibility with standard EEG analysis tools and its open data formats make it a versatile choice for researchers aiming to conduct large-scale or longitudinal sleep studies. In summary, the ZMax EEG system, combined with the Dreamento toolbox, provides a robust platform for advanced sleep research, offering the precision of clinical-grade equipment with the convenience required for at-home studies. The ZMAX system from Hypnodyne comes in 3 main packages, each designed to suit different research and application needs. The ZMAX Total package is the most comprehensive, including features like wireless transmission, memory card storage, offline scoring, online REM and SWS detection, PPG for heart rate, EEG recording, head movement tracking, ambient light and sound detection, temperature, and even an IR webcam while supplies last. It also integrates oxygen saturation and airflow tracking with optional sensors and supports HD Scorer and HD Recorder software in their Pro configurations. This version allows access to ZLab for managing data and collaboration, supports real-time low-latency data transfer over TCP/IP, and can be connected to external custom software. It's also compatible with TMR class real-time signal processing, and it comes with 3 years of technical support and includes electrodes. All this comes at a price point of €4,000, with payment terms offering a 30-day window from delivery when ordered with a university purchase order. ZMAX Lite, on the other hand, strips things down significantly to just the core EEG and accelerometer data capture, with no card storage or scoring features included. You lose out on physiological sensors, video, and real-time data options, but you can still run regular HD Scorer and HD Recorder versions. Support is limited to 1 month, no electrodes are included, and the price is reduced to €1,000. ZMAX for lucid dreaming targets real-time EEG stimulation and is tailored for dream engineering applications. It also lacks storage and most sensors, but retains online EEG scoring, stimulation capability, and 1-month support. Like the Lite version, it costs €1,000. Elective extras come with fees. For example, an extra software seat costs €1,000, an SpO2 sensor is €500, and additional software services like manual scoring and auto-score come at €40 and €15 per file, respectively. While the Total package includes generous features and long-term support, the other versions are more budget-conscious but lack critical tools for serious data collection or experimental flexibility. In essence, ZMAX Total is aimed at serious researchers who want a lab-grade EEG plus system for full-spectrum sleep studies. ZMAX Lite is a minimalist setup for limited data acquisition, and ZMAX LD sits in between with a narrow focus on real-time stimulation during sleep, especially for lucid dreaming applications. What you're looking at here is the ZMAX device from Hypnodyne in its physical form. The design is unapologetically functional, clearly prioritizing signal integrity and modular use over sleek consumer appeal. One side of the unit houses the electrode connectors and USB ports, while the other likely includes slots for memory cards and status indicator LEDs, as hinted the glowing blue light. The strap it's mounted on allows it to be comfortably worn around the head, and the minimalist white casing makes it feel clinical, bordering on medical grade, exactly what you'd expect from a tool designed for precise EEG and sleep stage tracking. This isn't a fashion statement or a lifestyle gadget. It's a research instrument, clearly engineered for reliability, data fidelity, and integration with broader sleep and neurophysiology setups. Whether you're monitoring brainwave activity, tracking REM onset, or triggering external stimuli for lucid dreaming experiments, the form here follows a very deliberate function. If you're looking to dive into raw EEG data collected using the Zemax system, Hypnodyne provides a comprehensive set of sample files directly on their website. These datasets are available in EDF format, a standard in EEG research, and encompass a range of physiological signals. The collection includes EEG recordings from the left and right channels, FP7-FPZ and FP8-FPZ, accelerometer data across 3 axes, heart rate derived from PPG signals, skin temperature readings, ambient light levels, and noise measurements. Additionally, there's a comparative dataset from a gold standard Vitaport PSG system, facilitating direct validation studies. For those interested in processing and analysing this data, the Dreamento Toolbox is an invaluable resource. This open-source Python-based platform offers functionalities for both real-time monitoring and offline post-processing of EEG data. It supports features like automatic sleep stage scoring, spectral analysis, and integration with other physiological measurements. Notably, Dreamento is compatible with Zemax data, even if the recordings weren't initially captured using Dreamento's interface. In summary, Hypnodyne's provision of raw EEG datasets combined with the analytical capabilities of Dreamento offers researchers a robust framework for exploring sleep physiology and related phenomena. Whether you're validating new algorithms or conducting comparative studies, these resources provide a solid foundation for your investigations. If you're curious to dig deeper into all the data, methods, tools, and findings behind what you've seen here, head over to bionichaus.com. Everything we do, from raw data and validation comparisons to software pipelines and device breakdowns, is fully open-sourced and freely available. No paywalls, no gimmicks, just transparency and curiosity-driven exploration. It's where the messy, fascinating chaos of biosignal analysis becomes a playground for anyone who wants to build, question, and challenge the future of personal health tech. That's a wrap. We've compared consumer wearables to clinical and research-grade tools, questioned what sleep and heart data really mean, and showed you exactly where things match up and where they fall apart. If you found any of this eye-opening, head to bionichaus.com, where it's all open, raw, and ready for your own analysis. Thanks for watching. Stay skeptical, stay curious,